Jett Washington has committed to Oregon and its elite secondary future. Meanwhile, the Ducks' quarterback future, it's a little bit of a puzzle in progress. Plus, reload culture is alive and well in Eugene. A Saturday summer solstice edition of That Show Out West starts right about now.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LeBrew, and happy Saturday. It's not very often that we do Saturday shows. Have I done a regular TSOW on a Saturday? Not sure, but yet here we are. And yeah, this will not be the final TSOW that you will see on a Saturday. Going to have Saturdays absolutely covered during the fall. And speaking of Saturdays during the fall, count them 10 Saturdays to go until the Oregon Ducks welcome in the Montana State Bobcats into the zoo for the season opener on August 30th. Now, although this will not be the last TSOW that you will see on a Saturday, this is the final TSOW that you will see until after July 4th, as I am taking the first of two outdoors wilderness camping adventures that I'm going to be taking this summer, headed out up to the mountains of Montana that I am absolutely thrilled about, absolutely excited about. So I'm going to try to post segments a little bit more spaced out than usual, so there still will be content dropping on the YouTube side of things, but you know, I will be gone for a couple of weeks here. So really, for the first time since this show started in January, after the Rose Bowl, I will not have at least one show during a week. So I'd like to think it's a much-deserved break. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also looking forward to talking about a lot, because we know this last week and change of June and going into July, this is a huge recruiting time, a huge commitment time. So I got a feeling that when I return and when TSOW returns, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. We are going to start off this show with a holy wallawa from Thursday, when Jett Washington officially announced his commitment to the University of Oregon. And not only that, but Oregon's elite secondary future. This is something to get excited about. This is something to get pumped about, although it may have been the worst kept secret in college football recruiting. Certainly, I was told earlier in the week that he had already committed to Oregon's coaching staff, and it was just a matter of when it was going to be announced. There were a lot of other elite defensive back commitment announcements during the week, so you kind of had to really put it in a slot that you felt good about, so to speak, with everything else kind of going on that week. And Thursday night was the time when everybody thought that was certainly the best. So that was really welcome news after news earlier in the day that was maybe come to expected, but certainly did not go in favor of the Oregon Ducks. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. But first, a quick synopsis on Jett. Now, I've broken down his film, and I've given you a little bit more of an in-depth evaluation, but here's really the spark notes that you need to know. Jett, the number 3 overall safety in the country, according to the On3 industry, a top 30 overall player, 6'5", just over 200 pounds. Like, his ball skills are like a wide receiver. Like, you watch his film and you'll be like, what side of the ball is he playing on? Right, that's how good that he kind of looks when you have that type of situation where you have a contested pass deep in the secondary. He's got fantastic range, fantastic anticipation, being able to play really well in the run. He can lay the lumber. Like, you look at the speed You look at the ball skills, you look at the agility, you look at the anticipation, you look at the physicality. Like, these are all things that Tosh Lupoi, Chris Hampton, Dan Lanning, and this entire defensive coaching staff really wants in an elite level safety. And they got an elite level safety for the second consecutive year. Of course, Trey McNutt last season. And, Oregon in the past, maybe some of their defensive backs, a little bit smaller, certainly not 6'5", certainly not this long. This is just another example of them finding the traits that they want in a specific position, in a specific player, and really building upon that and really starting a new generation of what Oregon's secondary is going to look like. And folks, this secondary is just, it's going to be fantastic. That's like, when I look at the next 2, 3, 4 years of Oregon football, yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. But man, I could not be more excited about what exactly is going to become of this secondary. I think this season starting in 2025 is going to begin a new and very bright future for the Ducks on the back end. A back end that has maybe folded up a little bit in some of the biggest games for Oregon the last couple of seasons. Now, let's talk about some, because his commitment kind of ties in with some of the other announcements that were made. We started off the day on Thursday with Brandon Arrington. Now, although my prediction was for Oregon, after my prediction was made and after my show aired, that's when things really started to turn towards Texas A&M. I shouldn't maybe say turn. I should say they were confirmed, really, for Texas A&M. Okay? When it's playing time, it's really hard to sell Brandon Arrington on playing time when you just got 3 top 75 corners the year before. NIL is something that I want to focus on, and we're going to be focusing on that a little bit later in the program as well. But I think Oregon was ultra invested in finding an elite level safety this year, knowing that they got a handful of great corners last season. I think that this staff identified Jett Washington's our guy. If we get Joey O'Brien too, great. But Jett Washington is the guy we want, and that's the guy they got for the future at the safety position. I'm really intrigued to see exactly how Jett is going to really mesh in with these safeties. Post Dylan Thieneman next year, like, you still got Kingston Lopa, you still got Peyton Woodyard, you still got Aaron Flowers, you still got Trey McNutt. Like, I know he's going to be coming in as a true freshman and certainly isn't expected to come in and play significant time, although he possibly could. But I'm very curious to see exactly, like, during spring ball next year, where exactly is he going to stack up amongst these safeties? Because there's a lot of talent in those 4 names. You add Jett Washington in that conversation, there's a lot of talent at the safety position. Say no, no, no all day long to the transfer portal when you've got that kind of talent as well. Now, although the Ducks did not really, I talked about the DB Hall 2.0. And it really started, when I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Brandon Arrington is the guy that said, I really wanted. And I did really want them, but it really makes more sense that they got that. If they were going to choose between an elite level safety and an elite level corner, like I stated before, with the playing time, with the money distribution, it would make more sense that you go after the safety. Now that you got Jett Washington, now that Brandon Arrington is off the board, now that Joey O'Brien is off the board, I think your attention really turns to Devon Benjamin. Top 50 or so, top 60, high 4-star corner from the state of California. He's been on 3 RPM, predicted to end up at Oregon. Like, I know Texas is kind of making a little bit of a push right now, but Oregon really seems the place that he is going to go. So now, like, in recalibrated expectations, I still think that you can have a pretty good haul of a 5-star Jett Washington, a top 50 overall player in Devon Benjamin. You already got Xavier Larice locked in. He shut down his recruitment as well. Devin Jackson is a 4-star safety that they could pivot to. So now, where you've got 3 corners and a safety in 25, you could pivot back and do it completely the opposite and have 3 safeties and a corner. And now things really start to balance out going forward. So I cannot wait to see exactly where these guys really fall into the grand scheme of things. But these guys got the traits. They got the height. They got the length. They got the speed. I give the defensive line in 2025 a lot of credit. I think that they are going to eat, and I think that's going to be a group that's going to be really good for a long time. But, man, this secondary has an opportunity, I think, to be generational. I truly believe that. I am bought into this secondary, just being absolute ball hawks back there and being the future of the defense. Jett Washington, man, he is going to be a significant part of that, and this secondary is absolutely crawling with talent, and they are committed to this group being a difference-making group for the Ducks going forward. We move from the defensive side to the offensive side on the Oregon recruiting trail. And when you're in your stagecoaches, when you're in your covered wagons, sometimes you can be trekking up a big hill, trekking up a mountain maybe, and other times you kind of go deep into that valley. There have certainly been hills and valleys as it pertains to quarterback recruiting for the Oregon Ducks in the 26 cycle. You can even go back to the very end of the 25 cycle. That signing day flip, getting Geron Kavawe, Sangapulatele, and then a few days after the Rose Bowl, he says, yeah, I'm good. I'm going back to Cal. That was kind of a wild ride in and of itself. And then you look at the 26 cycle. Jonas Williams was committed, and I think Oregon felt really good about having Jonas Williams committed. But then they dipped their toe into the Jared Curtis waters. At that time, Jonas decommits, and then he heads over, and his commitment heads over to Southern California with the Trojans. Then Oregon gets into this battle with Georgia with Jared Curtis for a couple of months, only for Jared to recommit to where he was committed before in the Bulldogs. Right after that, everybody's saying, well, that's it, Ryder Lyons. Everybody putting in their predictions for five-star quarterback Ryder Lyons to end up at Oregon, and now that is less than a certainty. And then now in these last couple of weeks, you've got 2 4-star quarterbacks that are late risers, but they are rising really fast. And I think for most of us, they've come out of nowhere. That being Matt Ponatoski. I talked about him in a previous edition of TSOW a handful of weeks ago. And then Bryson Beaver, who has really come on as of late. Both of these guys earlier in the week were at the Elite 11. So you know both of these guys are extremely talented quarterbacks. Not only were they both at the Elite 11, as we speak, they are both on campus in Eugene, Oregon, which makes things pretty intriguing, pretty interesting, and this whole situation, it's kind of a little bit tricky, isn't it? Now, I've talked about the skill set of Ponatoski in a previous edition of TSOW, but I think when I look at this entire situation, Ryder and his mission, Ponatoski and maybe his future being in baseball and not in football, I really circle back and I see all of these moving parts. And I think Bryson Beaver is the best quarterback option in 2026 for the Oregon Ducks. Imagine saying that a month ago. He was committed to Boise State. More on that here in just a little bit. But when I look at Bryson on tape, you know, he was voted, and everybody at the Elite 11 camp said, yeah, he's got the strongest arm. That's superlative, but the strong arm also pops on his high school tape. Man, he uses his mobility in a really positive way, both in the run game and the pass game, but to really get outside the pocket, and he does a really good job planting that 1 foot in the ground, throwing on the run. Not only is his arm strong, getting the ball down the field in those types of situations, but more often than not, he's really, really accurate. I think that he throws a more consistent, better deep ball than Ponatoski does, but I think they do have similar skill sets in how they play the game of football, no doubt. But let's circle back to why I think Bryson is the best quarterback option. He's just a guy, like, hey, I'm just a class of 2026 guy. I don't really have anything else going on. I'm a West Coast recruit. All right, I'll be there. I'll be there, you know, when I come out of campus in January of 2026. And I think the reliability and the development potential for Beaver, I think, is very enticing in this whole process for Oregon. I believe that there is something to be said about how this whole process really came to be about with Oregon and Bryson Beaver. and really how he reopened his commitment. Like I said before, he was committed to Boise State. As soon as he decommitted, one of his first offers, it was like the next day or 2 days after, Oregon offered him at that point. Now, I'm sure the Ducks were in conversations with Bryson before that. After Oregon's offer, that's when the floodgates really started to open. And you saw more big-time offers for him at that point in time. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Will Stein and this offensive coaching staff saw something in him maybe before other guys did. Now, I can see what he did at the Elite 11 camp. I can look at his high school tape. I can do all of these things from where I'm sitting here in the studio chair right now, but for the coaching staff to be able to see that, that puts a lot of confidence in me that they believe that he can be a potential starting quarterback in the future for the Oregon Ducks. How about that? A guy with the last name Beaver being the starting quarterback for the Oregon Ducks, only in college football. It was like it was meant to be or something. One last thing I'll mention as it pertains to these two and how this whole quarterback situation and this whole quarterback puzzle is really playing out right now. I see both of these guys perform well at the Elite 11. I see both of these guys rising up the recruiting rankings. I see both of these guys getting some big-time offers and a lot more attention right now. And I kind of look around and I'm like, it makes Ryder Lyons a little bit, maybe not a lot, but a little bit less of a must commit and a must sign guy eventually once we get to that point with Ryder. Because I think that these guys are talented. There's something to be said about the ability to have Achilles Smith Jr., who everybody forgets about. Okay, everybody's talking when Jared was an option. Everybody was talking about him, and everybody's talked about Ryder. And here is little old top 150, top 175, four-star quarterback, Achilles Smith Jr. legacy guy who you know is going to be committed to the program. Sitting there, if he's able to develop for a couple of years the way he showed off his skills in the spring game, maybe he can be a starting quarterback for the Oregon Ducks sometime down the road. But I think there's something to be said to have guys on campus and to be able to develop within your system. Ryder, we know, is going on that mission. I think Ryder, out of all these three, there's no question Ryder is the most talented quarterback. But I think the developmental aspect, being around the program, also has to be taken into account. The possibility of Ponatoski to go play baseball, and then what's happening with Ryder, that once again leads me back to Mr. Bryson Beavers. And we'll see if Oregon can seal the deal on Beaver or one of these other guys this weekend while they are on campus. Now let's pivot back to the aforementioned Ryder Lyons. He is set to make his college commitment on Tuesday, June 24th. He is currently on campus in Provo, Utah at Brigham Young University. Of course, last weekend he was in the lab in Eugene, Oregon. Now there are two different paths that Ryder can take. And there are we'll call them two different positives, maybe one, maybe multiple in some cases, in each direction for both the Cougars and the Ducks. Let's start first with that school with the beautiful mountain backdrop, that being BYU right now. They have the big money offer on the table. They have the highest NIL offer for Ryder at this point in time. We've seen it so many times throughout this cycle with Oregon, where other teams just have a little bit more money on the table. Maybe in some cases, a lot more money on the table. There's a lot of schools throwing around a lot of money right now, and the Mormons got deep pockets. BYU is a school that can throw around the cash, no question about that. Of course, they got the faith connection, right? BYU is the school when it comes to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which Ryder Lyons is going to take a mission within that church, right? So that's number one. You got the family connection. His dad, Tim Lyons, played at BYU also back in the day. So those are some pretty strong connections. But I think you pivot back to Oregon. Like, if this is a pre-NIL recruitment, this thing's definitely going in favor of the Ducks. Like, they have the proven track record. Will Stein, and Ryder has said this in interviews, Will Stein has recruited Ryder harder than anybody out there. They have that track record of developing quarterbacks and the quarterback-friendly system. So Which is Ryder going to choose? Here's my prediction on where I think Lyons is going to go on Tuesday. Duck fans, you might not like it, but I think that this thing is trending towards the BYU Cougars. My prediction is that Ryder Lyons will commit to BYU on Tuesday. 24/7 Sports recently has kind of flipped their crystal ball over to BYU. This feels really close to a 50-50 battle, but like the scuttlebutt is saying that this thing is slowly but surely shifting over to the BYU side. And folks, I think the money has a lot to do with it. I do not believe that Oregon is going to match or exceed that offer. I think some reasons because of that is what we just talked about in the previous segment and how they feel. They can get Bryson Beavers at a much lesser rate, most likely, as compared to overpaying for someone like Ryder Lyons that won't be on campus until 2027, folks. And then you look at Oregon, what they've done with their last two quarterbacks in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. I believe that they believe they can go into the transfer portal any cycle and get one of the top portal quarterbacks out there. They have the track record that has been able to prove that, to put two transfer quarterbacks in New York City to be able to be Heisman finalists. So, although this would be another 5-star quarterback strikeout, okay, or a high profile, maybe I should say, quarterback strikeout with what happened with Jonas, with what happened with Jared, and now with what might happen with Ryder. But folks, if there's one position that I believe Oregon will be good at, it's going to be this quarterback position. You know, one thing that I really appreciate having this show, having this platform, is the ability to really dive in headfirst, to really dive deep into how Oregon approaches recruiting, how Oregon approaches roster construction. Because I've been following things from a conference-wide level. I've been focusing on things certainly from a national. I've been following national recruiting for a very long time, but not maybe the nuts and bolts of it. Not maybe the inner workings of it within a specific program. And now following Oregon throughout this cycle, I think I've got a pretty good gauge on how exactly that they are approaching things. Because how they are approaching things are pretty different right now than maybe some other teams are approaching some things. Other teams out there are throwing a lot of money around. Other teams out there are getting a lot of commitments right now because of those big-time NIL deals that are being put on the table at this very point in time. It has been reported. It has been clear. Oregon is very steadfast. They are very strong on just how high, just how far they are willing to go. Oregon's approach is the long game, whereas other schools right now might be looking for that instant gratification. They might be throwing a lot of money on the table to be able to load up, whether it is before that July 1st house settlement deadline, whether that's a big reason, or whether that's what they feel they have to do to be able to move from 6 wins to 8, 9, or 10 wins down the road. Oregon, I believe, is very confident in their position, and they believe this long approach is going to work. And I believe that this long game approach is certainly going to work. Oregon's not going to get through this entire cycle and getting the guys they want without dropping a bag. Drop the bag at positions of need and priorities that you view as absolute top priorities in this recruiting class. This will eventually tie into what I'm going to say about the transfer portal, but you look at quarterback, for example. You know, they've gotten into some of these recruitments. We know what happened with Jared Curtis. I'm not exactly sure where the NIL really stood in all of that, but we know what's happening with Ryder Lyons right now and that big BYU offer that is on the table. And Oregon saying, I don't think we're going to go above a certain point with this recruitment right now because they know what they got at quarterback. Dante Moore, Austin Novosad, they know what the future looks like and what their development looks like, and they know what they can do when they go into the transfer portal and get anybody out of the portal right now. Like, they're not going to overspend just to overspend to be able to bring in a high schooler, a quarterback that is unproven at this moment in time. Another position, corner. Now, corner is a very valuable position, of course, on a football field, but in this cycle, in 2026, it maybe wasn't the biggest position of need because of what happened in the 25 cycle. These things are going to go in cycles. Remember that as well. Last year, they got 3 top 75 corners. So they were already loaded. So it was going to be really tough to justify spending the amount of money that Texas A&M was on Brandon Arrington. We know what just happened there with Arrington committing to the Aggies down in College Station. It was going to be really hard to be able to sell Arrington on playing time, considering with what you just brought in at that moment in time. So what the position of need is and how much money that you're willing to spend on that position also kind of goes into what you did the previous year, what you did 2 years ago, and how stacked your room is at that particular position as well. Now we kind of go into the positives. What we talked about at the beginning of the show, the commitment of Jett Washington. Okay, yes, they did get one safety last year in Trey McNutt, but I mentioned before, they got 3 corners. So this was a position of need. And I think it was pretty clear to me that Oregon identified, all right, this is the safety we want. When they locked in on Jett, they said, we're going to get it done. And look what happened. They got the job done. Now, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth a little bit because like safety is one of those positions where it's hard to get like really quality players out of the transfer portal. The top 2 safeties in the country right now, it looks like are transfers. Dylan Thieneman at Oregon, Caleb Downs over there at Ohio State, but that doesn't happen every time. That's a position where you need to be able to recruit really well to be able to have those great to elite level players at that type of position. You know what another position is? Offensive tackle. Gee, we're talking about Isaiah World and Alex Harkey, 2 extremely highly graded offensive tackles here, Ted. But once again, that's not necessarily a position where it's going to be absolutely fruitful in the transfer portal every single year and every single cycle. Oregon will drop a bag, probably their biggest bag on Emmanuel Ahi-Nacho. At this point, I would be surprised if Nacho is not a Duck. His commitment date is August 5th, but by the time he walks off of campus this weekend, that he might be committed. That's kind of the rumor. That's kind of the whispers in the wind right now. Offensive tackle, an extremely important position. So you kind of go down the list and Oregon really identifying a group of players. I thought Brandon Arrington might be that player, but it turns out he was not that player. One guy I would certainly keep my eye on, Tyler Atkinson. Dan Lanning is taking the point in that recruitment. That's one where I could see them investing a lot of money right now. So Oregon is investing their money recruiting-wise at the top right now. And then they're certainly trying to trickle down. This was always going to be a smaller class, I think, to begin with. With the players that they pick, they're going to be ultra picky and choosy with the way that they choose to spend their high amounts of money. Top transfers are still important to success here at the University of Oregon. Now, 24/7 site, Duck Territory, came out with a report that said, hey, it sounds like Oregon is pushing a lot of money, investing a lot of resources into the transfer portal and transfer portal recruiting right now. A lot of people took that as well, especially with what's going on with high school recruiting right now. Oh, they're not putting as much money into the high school side. And that's the connection that people made. And that's fine. People can make that connection, but it's been like, look at the amount of great transfers and how impactful they have been to Oregon getting W's on the field. You look at the quarterbacks, Bo Nix, you look at Dylan Gabriel, you look at Bucky Irving, you look at Tez Johnson, you look at Jordan Burch. I mean, you can go down the list of these impactful transfers. So, and what happens when a transfer comes onto campus in Eugene? They commit. To my knowledge, the only guy definitely in the last couple of years that has been to campus in Eugene but hasn't committed to Oregon was Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, and he went over to Ole Miss. That, I believe, is a big-time priority. It is a big-time resource for this Oregon football program, and that's what roster construction is right now. You've got to be able to look ahead. You got to be able to play the long game. You just can't spend tens of millions of dollars right now in recruiting from the spring to June in the summer, and then hope it all turns out well, and then you look around and say, oh crap, now we don't have as much money with transfer portal recruiting. It's all about balance, and I believe Oregon has a lot of balance right now. So you could call it playing the long game, you could call it balance, you can call it whatever you want. I think that's the game that they're certainly trying to play right now. And Dan Lanning has said this in an interview before. Now, in the current climate of college football, it's never been a better time to finish second place in a recruitment. This cycle, 2026, I'm going to give you a list of guys. That Oregon came in second place, whether they were in a announced commitment or whether it was a flip. Jared Curtis, Tamahini Tapui, Jonas Williams, Cody Green, Brandon Arrington, Jackson Cantwell, Zion Ely. Those are some pretty damn good players. Their second place list is a lot better right now than their first place list. Okay, so when or if some of these guys enter the transfer portal, one of the first calls is going to be to Dan Lanning. One of the first mutual connections is going to be between Oregon and some of these players as well. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. I believe in this staff. They didn't wake up and all of a sudden forget how to acquire talent. They all of a sudden didn't wake up and forget how to construct a roster. I believe they're playing with balance. I believe they're playing with a long game. Will Oregon have their third consecutive top 5 recruiting class? Maybe not. But I think with where the Ducks sit right now and their stack roster dropping down to like 6, 7, and 8, and eventually kind of popping back up to the top 5, these things are going to come in cycles. It's going to come and go, and I'm totally fine with that. If I were to ask you, what are a couple of groups, position groups on this Oregon roster for 2025 that you think have question marks, maybe they're a little bit uncertain, and you're just not quite completely sure if they're going to be great or if they're going to be good or really good or just how good that they are going to be. What are some that you might choose? I think 2 that certainly stand out because of the amount of players, really good players, that they lost from last season: the offensive line and the secondary. Let me throw a stat at you. Okay? We know 5 players in the secondary in the Oregon defense. We know 5 players on the offensive line. Okay? That's 10 players combined. Now, those 10 spots, there are 3, count them, 3 combined players on this 2025 roster that have started in 4 or more games wearing an Oregon Ducks uniform. 2 on the offensive line and 1 in the secondary. On the offensive line, Iapane Lalaolu, of course, at center. He's been a stalwart the last couple of years. Dave Iuli, I put the number at 4 because he started 4 games in relief of Marcus Harper last season. And then you got to go back to 2023 with Jaleel Florence. Of course, he was banged up last season, but Jaleel Florence started, I believe it was 9 games for Oregon during the 2023 season. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Now, let's go on to the next point here within this segment. Pro Football Focus. Now, their player rankings and ratings are a little bit odd, I will say, sometimes. So I think, take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But I think when they're kind of going through some of their position group rankings, I think you can certainly, I think this is certainly a valid ranking and something that we can certainly take very, very seriously. And we are going to take very, very seriously here on this show. Pro Football Focus ranks Oregon's offensive line coming into the 2025 season number 5 in the country. The secondary, you ask? Also in the top 10, ranked number 6 in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. Where does this kind of lead me to? It leads me to reload culture is alive and well in Eugene, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest, man. Okay, whether it's pre-NIL and portal, and now it's more difficult to really reload as consistently in the post-NIL and portal era. If you're like, you look at the Alabamas of the world, you look at the Ohio States of the world, you look at the Georgias of the world, whatever team in whatever era that has had 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of consistent success where they are at the top of college football, what's a phrase that follows them? They don't rebuild, they reload. Oh, this team or that team, they lost all of this talent. They lost 12 guys to the NFL draft. They lost their entire offensive line. They lost their entire defensive line, whatever position group that we're talking about. Okay, when you've talked about that over the last 20 to 25 years with Ohio State, you said they're just going to go onto their bench. They're going to find the 4-star player. They're going to find the 5-star player that's waiting their turn to be able to come in, and they're going to be able to play. And Ohio State's going to be Ohio State. Under Nick Saban, you had the same thing with Alabama. I've heard some folks say, they're building a program and not necessarily teams. Look at the 2 teams that were in the 2023 National Championship game, or from the 2023 season. Michigan and Washington, and look what they dropped down to. Like, when you're building a program instead of a team, you're building 10, 11, 12, that type of yearly production like we saw under Nick Saban at Alabama, like we've seen at Ohio State since I can remember. I do not remember. I know Ohio State had that year where Luke Fickell was the interim coach where they went 6-7. Other than that, it's just been constant contending at the top of the Big Ten Conference. That's what this tells me, where Oregon is sitting after these 2 position groups were kind of decimated a little bit with the amount of really good all Big Ten type of talent and draft picks and all of that stuff, and that these 2 groups were really left behind with. And now that how they're reloading, and one might say, yes, it is sometimes more difficult to retain some of this elite talent, so therefore maybe it's sometimes more difficult to reload, but Oregon has also used the transfer portal to their advantage. I believe Oregon uses the portal, and I talked about this earlier in the show, but I think Oregon uses the transfer portal maybe better than anybody in college football. Like, you look at Emmanuel Pranon coming in on this offensive line. Like, he was going to be a mid-round draft pick. He moves up to Oregon to get an opportunity with an offensive line that has been back-to-back Joe Moore Award finalist. You look at Harkey moving up a level. You look at Isaiah World jumping up a level. And then you look at the secondary and some of the transfers that they bought in. Like, I think a big reason why these 2 position groups are as highly thought of as they are by Pro Football Focus is because of these transfers. I mentioned the guys in the O-line, and then you look at a guy like Dylan Thieneman coming in there at safety as well. So I guess it doesn't really matter how you do it. Great teams just do it. Great teams just reload. And Oregon is reloading on the offensive line. Oregon is usually reloading is hey, operating at the status that we were a year ago or whatever. Oregon is improving. They are climbing the ladder in the secondary with some of the additions and some of the recruits that they've developed and are expecting to step up, I think, into bigger roles, certainly on the back end of the defense. Now, let's talk about the offensive line and the secondary and really the rest of the team, because I want to talk about I know we talked about what ifs kind of last week, but I want to talk about, man, if these 2 units are top 5, this team could have real high expectations. But offensively, I look at everything around them. Like, you look at the quarterback position, you're sitting really good there with either Austin Novosad or Dante Moore. You look to running back, I've said it many times, this is one of the deepest running backs that maybe the Ducks have seen in a very long time. Wide receiver, despite the loss of Evan Stewart, you feel really good there. How the offensive line gels together and how they mesh together is a big pivot point, exactly how successful this offense can be. If this is an offensive line that's operating at a top 10 level, that's operating at a top 5 level, the expectations are through the roof, honestly, offensively for this Oregon Ducks team. Like, tight end. Look what they got in Sadiq and Jamari Johnson, and, even going down to Roger Salapaga, even going down to Vander Plug and some of the other names that are in this group. You look to the defensive side. If that secondary is playing like I've already raved on how much I love and how much I believe in this defensive line. Okay, and I said many times before how much of a complementary relationship the defensive line, specifically the pass rush, has on the secondary. I already believe, okay, there's people out there that believe that Oregon has the number 1 defensive line in the Big Ten Conference, and I think I'm in that boat as well. But man, if you have that secondary playing at that type of level and you have the defensive line, I know the linebacker, that's a great, I know Bryce Betcher was really good last year, but I think as a whole, you're looking for that group to really take more steps up, and then you form a complete defense. Okay, at the beginning, I said, hey, some people have differentiating opinions on Pro Football Focus. ESPN's Greg McElroy has Oregon as I believe the number 10 offensive line in his rankings, and I think the overall defense, he had them at number 9. So these are two groups, secondary, of course, a big part of the overall defense. These are two groups that I think a lot of people are expecting. We talked about that rebuild versus reload. I think now people nationally, they look around and they see it's like, yeah, okay, there might be a little bit of an uncertainty with Ife Obadegwu or Kingston Lopa or Dalen Austin or maybe Theron Johnson meshing into the other corner on the other side. At Oregon, I think people are maybe just saying, yeah, it's what they do. It works. That's just Oregon. That's just Dan Lanning. You look at the offensive side, and I think people are looking at these players that are experienced, the Harkeys of the worlds, maybe at the smaller levels. And I talked about Pranon and what he's trying to accomplish this season. I think then some of these national people are looking around and saying, yeah, these aren't brand new players. These are guys that have played football before. And Alik Terry's a good coach. These are offensive lines that have won back-to-back Joe Moore Awards. There's good coaching here. It's what they do. Like, is Oregon's offensive line now just getting to the category? Yeah, that's what they do. They're Joe Moore Award finalists. Maybe this year is going to be that confirmation that this is just what Oregon does. Just like this is what Alabama did. It's what Ohio State does. It's what all these elite level schools do. We'll see if Oregon can live up to those expectations where this offensive line and this secondary could be top 5. If they are, we are in that championship. We are in the national championship conversation. You are having that because I think there's some parts to this team that you're unsure of how they're going to come together. If this offensive line comes together and they are top 5, if this secondary comes together and they are top 5, combined with how good I feel about other position groups and the rest of the team, it's going to be really hard to beat this Oregon football team next season. A great edition of That Show Out West is in the books. Like I said at the beginning of the program, I'm going to be going on a excursion out to the mountains of Montana that I cannot wait for. I will not be back for a full edition here in the studio of TSOW until after July 4th. If news does drop, if commitments drop, if something does drop Oregon related, once again, going to have limited cell service out there. But if something does drop, I'll try to film a video. I'll try to post it as much as I can, but it's going to be just an individual YouTube video. So make sure you're subscribed. For those of you that are maybe listening on audio, make sure you are subscribed over to the YouTube side so you get that content certainly as well. But until next time, until we meet again from here in the studio, have a good one. Have a good 4th of July, everybody. I'm Ted LaBrue. This has been That Show Out West.